Hello, welcome to the HR Strategy in the Hot Seat podcast. My name's Anwen Bottois, I'm your host, and I'm the founder of Purple Sky Consulting. I'm a leadership promotion specialist, and I also have a bit of a side hustle where I focus on development of HR leaders. So as the title of the podcast suggests, this is going to be all about HR strategy and how we can help HR professionals to consider the strategic elements of HR in more depth. Now let's get started with this episode. Right, here we go. Welcome, Ian. It's really lovely to have you on the podcast. Why don't you do a little introduction for our guests?
I'll do my best because I'm pretty rubbish at introductions because I'm not very good at bigging myself up, but it's kind of like to keep it simple. I am a coach and a leadership development consultant. I am a three-trick pony, effectively. So all of my work is about strengths or hope. So two fields of positive psychology and also coaching. So strengths, hope and coaching. And a lot of what I do is about helping leaders find hope for themselves and inspire hope in other people. That's probably as good as I can do for an intro.
I love that. So tell us a little bit more about your background then. How did you get into what you're doing? And tell us a little bit about the industries and the kinds of clients that you've been working with.
So my first degree was applied statistics and computing. So started off in IT, worked in the pharmaceutical industry, worked in AstraZeneca, and sort of progressively moved away from the technology towards people. So worked at AstraZeneca for 20 years in total. Well, it was ICI, then Zeneca, then AstraZeneca. Starting off as a developer and then changing things mostly because I'm better at changing things than I am at maintaining the status quo. While I was there, trained as a coach, started to get involved in leadership development. And my final job at AstraZeneca was change director for R&D global finance, so leading large-scale organizational change. At the same time, I was coaching both people and teams internally in certain situations, and I adored that part of my job. And I really wanted that to be all of my job. And, you know, there's just a few things happened along the way, had a bad motorbike accident and kind of, you know, those moments that make you think, yeah, life is short. And I just thought, I don't want to waste time, even though I was really fortunate, but doing a job that I kind of like is okay, but I only absolutely love 2% of it. So back in 2009, left to set up on my own, to set up Kingfisher Coaching. And that actually, it will be 17 years tomorrow that I've been running Kingfisher Coaching. Along the way, retrained, Masters in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology, postgrad in business, degree in theology along the way, kind of trained as a Gallup certified strengths coach. I'm obsessed about knowing what it is I'm talking about. That's really important to me. Client base, half my work is NHS. That's by choice. Really care about what they do and supporting the work. Work on some of the NHS national programs, work with universities, work with some big global fancy fashion brands. A real variety of different clients, and I really enjoy that. It keeps me fresh.
Because, yeah, that variety is always really interesting, isn't it? In terms of like, people are the same, but there is something about different contexts that can have, and different just organizational environments can have a real impact on kind of where people are, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's good for me to be able to like not get lulled into making assumptions, but to kind of to know that the context, the motivations, the history is different. And then at the funniest level, I found it different. Like a few weeks ago, I had a day where I was working at an organisation where we just ordered whatever coffee we want. It was delivered from the in-house restaurant very quickly, so I was getting very nice flat whites. The next day, I was at the Shard, where you push your button on the iPad. However you chose it, the coffee would emerge, a flat white with a certain milk for temperature would emerge from a tap. And then the next day I was working at an NHS trust where I was using the wrong end of a fork to shovel instant coffee and find the kettle somewhere. So the variety is healthy for me. It's really healthy for me. So
yes. That's made me think about, I was facilitating a full day leadership session on Tuesday, and the catering had been done by the client. Perfect, brilliant. The food was amazing, but obviously the catering numbers were maybe not reflecting who was actually in the room, so we didn't have quite enough plates. Luckily, they had pizza as part of the buffet thing, so they had pizza boxes for that. So my lunch that day was out of a pizza box.
The glamour of our working lives on occasions.
Absolutely, absolutely, and also I'm all for that. I'm not opposed to eating out of a pizza box, not at all. But I did wonder whether there'd be like cocktails coming out of the Shard taps that you were being offered rather than coffee. But that's for another time, I guess.
Yeah, I've worked for interesting clients where there's been like a Friday bar or a DJ and things like that, and you have to finish the workshop because the DJ would be kicking off, and it's like, but it's like through the work in Connecting Africa with the charity Hope for Justice, I've spent time working in both Uganda and Ethiopia, and that's really healthy for me as well. This kind of, never getting into the stage where I think I know what's going on for people, and not making that assumptions, and then and as you say, different foods in different settings and pizza boxes.
Definitely. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that work that you're doing?
So I have been involved with a charity called Retrack that then joined the Hope for Justice family. Retrack was working with street children and street connected children, and it became part of Hope for Justice, which is a global charity working to eliminate modern slavery and human trafficking around the world. And I served as a trustee, was on the board for quite a few years, and I've always committed that I will do everything I can to support the work of Hope for Justice. I know the impact it makes. And I was in Ethiopia once with the board, and we'd been out sort of seeing the work of Hope for Justice. And there were a lot of street children who just on the edge of the slum. And actually, there was one particular instance. So I saw some children, there was grain being delivered by a lorry, and the children were sweeping grain off the floor, anything that had fallen down, they were sweeping it up and cleaning it. And then anything that had fallen into the mud, the grain, they were sweeping that up into a separate container. And they were then out hustling and selling the grain for humans that had fallen on the floor and was okay, and selling the grain that was in the mud for animals. And whenever I've worked in that context, I've just been so inspired by the resourcefulness. And, here's me waiting until, not wanting to be judged, fear of failure sometimes, waiting to the perfect time to start, waiting until I've done another course. And here you've got people who are incredibly resourceful and out hustling, and that's always inspired me. And having co-founded Connecting HR Manchester, that brings people together, I remember on the flight back from Ethiopia thinking, I'm doing what I can to support the work, but I need to do more. Inspired by the resourcefulness, I was thinking, what have I got? And the answer was a network of absolutely amazing people that do L&D, HR, psychology-based stuff. So I had this idea, what if we could do a skills-based volunteering trip where I would get a team of people who would come, and we've alternated between Uganda and Ethiopia, would take a week off, pay for all the costs of their travel, agree to fundraise extra money for Hope for Justice, and would basically just come and put their skills to work. And so I was in Ethiopia in November with a team of amazing people, and we were running workshops for the staff, things that are our so we weren't painting buildings, we were using our skills and seeing the work, and it's impactful on every level. And I come back, I think it's the 8th trip we've done now, and I'm coming back a slightly better human being each time. Still very much work in progress, but it's something. Can I say I'm proud in a humble way? It's kind of to actually, to see the impact that it makes. It is a humbling experience. And for me, that's about, being resourceful and helping people to use their skills in a different context.
Yeah. And learning is such a powerful way of supporting people to grow in all kinds of contexts, isn't it? And that's another one, isn't it? Like, I just love that. And you really should be proud of yourself. I think that's incredible, that the impact that you're having there. So, fabulous. And thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. But can I take a collective pride? Because it's the people that sort of, looked at this crazy idea and thought, oh, yeah, we're up for that. And, have made the impact as well. So I sort of knew what was letting myself in for, but the people that have either put the faith in me or the trip is amazing. And there are amazing staff, local staff, child psychologists, social workers, teachers, art therapists, people doing all sorts of amazing work. And it was really nice to be there for them and to be able to, to do something that they always struggle to invest in and be there for them.
Because that's not a priority, really, is it, in terms of everything else that they've got going on in their lives? So, yeah, being deliberate about going, we can give you this, I think is just such a nice way of saying, well, actually, because we can give that helps to kind of give the focus to that deliberately, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It creates a space for it.
Wonderful. Okay, then, Ian, what is it that you want to put into the HR strategy hot seat?
I want to put hope in the hot seat, and particularly having written a book called Hope is a Strategy that I have near. I always have to travel with a copy now. Wherever I go, I've realised I can't go anywhere without a book. But I want to put hope in the hot seat today.
Fantastic. So why don't we start by you explaining a little bit about maybe the premise of your book and why this should be something we're talking about in the hot seats?
So the reason I called it Hope is a Strategy is to take a deliberately opposing view and contrarian view to everybody that says hope is not a strategy. And the reason I did that is, even though we use the word hope in a very kind of wishy-washy way every day, I hope this email finds you well. I hope this happens. I hope somebody wins the football, whatever it might be. Hope in psychology is a really active concept. We've got a lot of really good quality research going back, it's about 40 years, maybe slightly longer.
Wow.
And hope is a really active pursuit of better. So hope in psychology is about knowing what it is you want things to be in the future, believing that the future can be better, about seeing how you can get there and knowing the path, often multiple paths. So we've got some resilience and flexibility, and then getting off our bums and doing what it takes to make that a reality. So hope is a really active pursuit of better. I'm fascinated. The research originated into research about the psychology of making excuses. The research, the whole research project was about talk about excuses. Why do you make excuses for not doing that project, not having that difficult conversation, not going to the gym, whatever it might be. And the research led to a conversation about, but what's the upside of this? What's the opposite? And so it's not quite this simple, but the research into hope originated as research into what's the opposite of making excuses. So hope is really active. It's a really active belief, and it crops up in my life and work in so many different areas. In 2025, Gallup for quite a few years have done a piece of research into followership and have posed the question about what do people want from leaders. And it was a piece of research presented to the World Government Summit. And Gallup identified that the number one thing that people all around the world wanted from leaders is hope. That's leaders in organizations, families, faith organizations, politics, and I guess it makes sense. It's like, when I've worked in an organization, when the CEO stands up and talks about, things are difficult, this is happening. What do we want? Hope. I want to be able to see both collectively and individually how things can be in the future. And that it's going to be better, but also knowing that we can put into practice the things that we need to do to make that a reality. And so there was a whole combination of things. And I guess it was one of those things where probably about 6 or 7 different strands in my life came together. I'd run a workshop in Uganda that actually was about hope, even though I didn't know it at the time. In my own experiences with things like recovery from a motorbike accident, hope. In my work, it's hope that's driven me. And even in writing the book, I've applied the principles to actually write the book. So I think hope is a really powerful construct. And actually, for quite a few years, I've found it to be a really empowering lens, and a way of making sense of things. So my premise is that it was Napoleon that said, a leader is a dealer in hope. And actually, I think that's quite a good way, of looking at it.
Yeah, it is.
The role of a leader is to help people, to inspire hope in other people and to help them find hope. That said, how many leaders actually know how to do it for themselves? Hope is both learnable and teachable. I'd say very few. And how often do we actually include this in leadership programs? It's very, very... I don't know whether other than mine now,
No.
I don't know. Sorry, that sounded really arrogant, but it's kind of, it's something that I very rarely encounter a discussion about. And so my academic research was a thematic analysis, and other research projects called Is Hope a Strategy? And then you can guess what conclusion I came to, because my subsequent book has been called Hope is a Strategy. And so I wrote it to try and get it out there and to just help people to actually understand hope as a lens and to know. First part of the book is how you can find hope for yourself. And then the second part of the book is largely exploring my research, but other pre-existing research about how leaders can help other people find hope.
It's so interesting because as you're talking there, I am thinking about some of the leaders that I hold up as the people that I really loved working for or had a positive impact on me. And actually, I can feel it now already of like, actually, that was somebody who brought hope either to a situation or the context we were in or my career or my development. And that's really interesting, Ian.
And it's because if you've got, I love the fact that I can see you thinking about this now, but it's like, it becomes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you've got hope, then you take the actions to give it your best shot. And so even, like I've got a 9-year-old border collie called Buddy. I knew I'd talk about him on the podcast. And Buddy had quite a bad injury. We compete in agility. And last year he picked up a common injury in sporting dogs, which is an iliopsoas strain. And, it's been quite a recovery. But he loves agility. If we're walking past an arena, he tries to pull me in so we can go and do jumps and tunnels again. And I remember sitting there last year, like injured dog, thinking, but like he's not getting any younger, but he loves agility. And I actually sat down and used the planning tools in my book. And it's kind of, I don't know whether we can get back, but we are going to do everything in our power with physio and exercises and being intentional about rest. And 2 weeks ago, so he managed to get back to agility just around after Christmas, just before New Year.
Oh, brilliant.
And we've just made it up to A4A steeplechase champion grade. He's literally made it to champ. And that's the power
awesome.
of hope. That's just, but it applies to everything. It applies to organizational change, navigating difficulties, surviving all that's going on in the world at the moment. And I've written an article for the Association for Coaching magazine this month about uncertainty and about saying, the pursuit of trying to provide certainty in uncertain times is often fruitless. We can't do it. But what we can do is give people hope. And if collectively we've got hope, then we'll come together and we'll navigate things and we will be okay.
And when we find ourselves in that place of hopelessness, it's very difficult to succeed, isn't it? And I think you would have been very easy with Buddy to go, there, buddy. You're not let's not put you under any more stress. Let's not risk another injury or that getting worse. But actually, if that had been the approach, then you wouldn't be where you are now.
And if you could see the joy on his face every time he runs at agility, it's worth it. Absolutely. And I had a bad motorbike accident and broke quite a few things, including my leg really badly. And it was like about 9 months before I could walk again. And then even then, it was with a really bad limp sort of dragging my leg behind me. And it's putting the effort in that is sometimes hard that makes the outcome a reality. Hope, and we've got the evidence, hope is a really powerful thing. And even there's research that shows amongst people who are terminally ill, hope reduces anxiety and depression. And, we've got to be really careful here. We're not saying anything stupid like hope, cures a terminal illness. But where people took control, and were focused on taking ownership and effectively playing the hand that they're dealt, then they can make the best of the situation. So we've got a lot of evidence that says hope is really powerful. When we get people focused on how it could be and moving in that direction, it's incredibly powerful and it's contagious. The whole concept of emotional contagion, you can see hope spread. And one of the things I talk about, and I'm actually doing some more research on, is about how powerful communities are. Leaders play a big role, but communities with each other. You can see communities of hope where people reframe failure, support each other, spot strengths in each other. And those are really powerful. And I guess that's why, if you think about the communities you and I are part of, they're powerful.
Yeah, they are. They're really powerful. And but I think what I'm hearing there as well, that connection, is the deliberateness of it. And if we think about that concept in the hope piece, we also see that when we're working with leaders generally, don't we? Where there's a deliberate focus on doing the right thing, it makes it a lot easier and more likely that it's going to have a positive impact, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that sort of being deliberate, or that intentionality, rather than just go almost onto autopilot. So like one of the areas where I see people destroying hope is through either leaders whose default is a little bit doom and gloom and build a burning platform. Doom and gloom doesn't inspire hope. If you and I were working together, we're going through a really difficult time, and I've got my head in my hands saying, just don't know, that doesn't inspire hope. But at the opposite end of the scale, toxic positivity does not inspire hope. And it's not uncommon for leaders to almost go on the, do you know what, to assume that, if some positivity is good and inspires people, surely if I whack the dial right up, that'll really get people, on board. And so they'll go for toxic positivity. It'll be amazing. They will also then often stifle any dissent, the people who know what could go wrong that could actually help to increase hope. And then you end up with a failed project, failed initiative. And the next time that leader stands up, what's happened? People won't believe them and hope is destroyed. So part of the aim of writing the book and doing the research is to help leaders to be intentional about, really building and inspiring hope, and not just falling for sort of, into a natural trap that could really destroy it.
And if they're worried about it, they can practice it in life first, can't they? In terms of like home life and those types of areas before bringing it into a workplace setting if they don't feel comfortable with it, can't they?
Absolutely. And also, I think that's a really great point, because I'd always argue that hope starts with you. It's like if you're going to stand up and try and inspire hope in other people, you need to find it yourself first. And it's really, I cannot stand up the front and make it look like I'm hopeful about something that I'm not really bought into. I don't ever want to master the art of sort of faking that authenticity.
No.
So starting with yourself is really powerful. And one of the things I've created through an earlier piece of academic research is something called the Hope Playsheet. And that's a really simple coaching and self-coaching tool that I'm making freely available on my website for people to download as a PDF. And deliberately, I'm not asking for, email address, full name, date of birth. It's like zero information. It's available to download as a PDF. And the website is hope.tips, and it's just called the Hope Play Sheet. And that's something leaders can start with. And start to find hope with anything. And then you start to get into the understanding more about how you can inspire it in others and help other people to find it.
Love that. And we'll make sure all the links and stuff are in the comments for people to go and find. So if we tie this into, so we've talked a little bit about leaders there, if we tie it into HR strategy, whether it's from a developing it or implementing it perspective, what would be your focus areas for that? What are your thoughts there?
I think there's some things to be really... So you can apply hope as a concept to HR strategy, and I would actually want to see hope included as part of that. I think it's a really empowering lens, but also there's a few things to be really careful of that can easily undermine it. And these things cropped up in my research where I just heard countless stories from people. And the first one to avoid is being performative in your response to a real problem. And so one example, and there's countless ones, is where there's a significant widespread problem with overwork, burnout, people struggling with well-being. And the solution was to get people in to give massages and to have a session where there was some free Danish pastries and croissant. Now, there's nothing wrong with hand massages and Danish pastry and croissant. However, being performative, where you attempt to create an illusion that you're fixing a deep problem by putting a sticking plaster over it, people don't fall for it. And that really destroys hope. So I think making sure that you're not performative, or even where things are, they're not part of the solution, and they are just look, we can do these few things. Be honest about that, I'd say. From a HR strategy problem, you may not want to hear this, but one of the other things that cropped up, this might be the wrong podcast to share this bit of my research, but one of the major things that cropped up as destroying hope was reorganizations, was restructures. And now I know, right, I've been part of them. I've led them. I've been part of the team that leads them. But I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with them. And where they destroyed hope was where a new leader would come in and there's a lot of things wrong. And the quickest way to make your mark is a restructure. And so what they would do is, design a new target operating model, get everybody to apply for the jobs, lose a few people, sometimes the people who can easily get jobs elsewhere. Ask people to keep lights on during the change, but that's easier said than done. And then, new models in place. And actually, nothing is that much different, but you hail it as a great success. And then sometimes move on to your next challenge. That was one example. The second one was where there was a lot wrong in the organization. That there were problems with the culture, there were problems with some toxic leaders, there were some problems with underperformance that had never been addressed. And again, the solution was a reorganization. So, you put people through the change. And actually, I'd argue that instead of waiting a few years and hoping a restructure would actually address all of those things, actually have the courage to fix what's broken, because organizational restructures don't. And if I were up for doing another piece of academic research outside of hope, and I don't think I've got the energy to do this, but it would be to actually look at the impact of restructures and to look at to what extent they actually deliver the real benefits that are claimed, because my hunch is that most of them don't. So
agreed. Agree on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So don't be performative. Be very wary about reorganizations. And my plea would be, think about what you really want and fix what's broken. And then the other one is psychological safety. go back to the sources, go back to Amy Edmondson's work. She's written several books. Go and read the research. The evidence is there that says, because it all started off as research, didn't it? Where she wanted to prove that higher performing teams made fewer errors. And her early research shocked her because it said the opposite. Higher performing teams were making more errors. And then when she dived deeper, she realized that it wasn't that. It was higher performing teams were being open about mistakes and were discussing challenges and were learning from it. And psychological safety increases hope as well. So from a HR perspective, there's actually loads that in HR we can do. So I've said, okay, to misquote Napoleon, said a leader is a dealer in hope, but I'd argue that HR are enablers of hope. HR can create the conditions in which hope can thrive, and hope is contagious. When you see it and you see people start to believe it, it catches and it spreads, and HR can do loads to fan the flames of that.
Absolutely. And you only need a bit of it, don't you, to get it started?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then you see it build. And you see that. You mentioned hopelessness. When you see people either lose hope because of an experience, or where it's more of a learned hopelessness or learned helplessness from previous experiences. I occasionally fall into that myself, based on my background. And when you see that little spark of hope, somebody believes a bit in themselves, maybe somebody helps them, a mentor helps them, a coach helps them, a peer helps them, and they succeed. And it's like, yay, and then other people can be your cheerleaders and build you up, and then you're prepared to step out a bit more, and you see that real progression.
Definitely. I think that's what I love so much about working with people with coaching, because I think it's almost a door opener for hope for people, isn't it? Work coaching, because you are looking at those opportunities, the path forwards. I love that about it.
And actually, do you know what? One of the surprises that came out of my I don't know why I was surprised about this. I should have been able to anticipate it. But, a thematic analysis, incredibly structured. I'm dealing with what was said in interviews. I'm doing a deep analysis. The themes are emerging. And one of the themes that emerged loud and clear was that coaching is hope.
Amazing.
And it was because, coaching is a process of helping people find hope. And it can be a really powerful format for doing that. And that can be professional coaching, or it can be peer coaching, that can be absolutely amazing.
I think there's so many benefits from those different elements. Is there anything else that you want to share on the hope as a strategy, or how that ties into the HR strategy side of things, Ian, before we start wrapping up?
I think maybe just one more thing, which is about, I think it's really important that there's a lot of people in HR and leaders elsewhere who, really need people to buy into hope. When we stand up with a vision, we need people to go, I'm up for that, and I'm going to do what it takes, and I'm going to be engaged in that. And I'd say, final thing, and I've not said this so far, optimize for trust. Because that is a big foundation.
Yes.
And, think about it. So you and I work independently. We've got a choice of what we optimize for. And occasionally I've fallen into the trap. Well, early days when I was worried about paying the mortgage, it's easy to fall in the trap of optimizing for money. Occasionally I nearly fall into the trap of optimizing for ego. But whereas now, I intentionally optimize for two things: impact and trust. And, think about, in every interaction, you either build or diminish trust. And so I think trust in leadership is a really valuable commodity. And every academic piece of research I've read about trust always quotes the same Dutch proverb: trust arrives on foot, but leaves on horseback. In other words, takes quite a long time to build, but you can lose it in the blink of an eye. And so it's a really valuable commodity, and it's a real enabler for hope. So yeah, just think about optimizing for trust and making sure that every interaction builds it rather than diminishes it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Ian. Where can people find you?
LinkedIn is probably a good place. I am Ian B Pettigrew on there, B for Barry. And only because there is another Ian Pettigrew that once in 18 years we've been confused with each other. Although we actually met each other at the CIPD annual conference introduced by Dave D'Souza, and we got a photo together of two Ian Pettigrews.
So you're both in the HR world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was brilliant. It was weird to meet him and like, can we get a selfie together? And it can go on LinkedIn. So I'm Ian B Pettigrew on LinkedIn. Hope is a Strategy has got a company page on there as well. Hope is a Strategy book is on Instagram, and I've got a website called hope.tips as well, which has got some content about hope. But as I write new things and continue my research, I'll be publishing it on there to try and really just make it a resource centre for people about hope. And that's where people can find the Hope Play Sheet.
Brilliant. It's been lovely spending some time with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experiences and what's been going on with you in this space. So all the best for the book. Thank you so much, Ian.
Anwen, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you ever so much for inviting me, because I really want to get just more information and more knowledge about hope out there, because it's powerful. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this episode of HR Strategy in the Hot Seats. Please leave us a review. Let us know what you think about this episode. What did you think about the topic? If you have any thoughts on topics, themes, questions, guests you'd like me to cover in future episodes, please do let me know. Get in touch with me via LinkedIn or drop me an email at anwen@purpleskyconsulting.co.uk. Hope that you could join us on the next episode, and make sure you share this with any of your network too. Thank you.